A political favor, a hidden rifle, and a guard who refused to lie. Welcome to the channel where discipline meets drama, and every silence tells a story. If you're passionate about real-life moments behind the iconic British Royal Guards, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's gripping tale of a training day that went terribly wrong, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Tomorrow we unveil another untold story, one that might just change how you see duty, honor, and a simple knock on the door. Don't miss it. It was supposed to be a simple day, a gesture of goodwill, a chance to inspire the next generation. Sergeant Callum Hayes had performed his duties with quiet pride for over 18 years in the Queen's Guard. He had marched in rain, sleet, and blistering summer heat. He had stood motionless through cheers, insults, and the buzzing of tourists' cameras. But today, he had been given a different task, something more delicate. He was to lead a small group of elite military students on a behind-the-scenes tour of Wellington Barracks. It was a rare honor. And Callum knew what this meant. These weren't just students. They were hand-picked cadets from the National Defense Academy, future officers, some even the children of political and military leaders. The goal wasn't just to show them the glint of polished buttons or the weight of ceremonial rifles. It was to pass on something deeper, the silent code of honor that every guard lived by. Among the group were 3 students who stood out. Elliot, the confident one, sharp, articulate, but dripping with arrogance. His father was a well-known member of Parliament, and Elliot carried himself like someone who'd never been told no. Sophie, quiet and observant. Her older brother had died in service 5 years ago, and she joined the academy not out of ambition, but out of remembrance. And Arjun, a transfer student from India, respectful, sharp-eyed, and very aware of the weight of tradition. Everything went smoothly, until they reached the training armory. It was a controlled environment. Decommissioned weapons were laid out for demonstration. Rifles with empty chambers, bolts removed. Harmless, but still treated with respect. Callum walked the students through the layout, explaining posture, handling, and symbolism. Then, as part of the interactive experience, Elliot was invited to hold a rifle, a privilege only extended in tightly monitored settings. Elliot grinned as he picked it up. So, this is it? All that seriousness for a bit of metal and fluff? Before Callum could respond, Elliot raised the rifle and pressed the trigger. Click. The sound wasn't loud, but in a silent military hall, it was deafening. Everything stopped. Arjun turned white. Sophie dropped the replica bayonet she was holding. And Callum felt the breath leave his chest. No round was fired. No one was hurt. But protocol had just been shattered. More than that, it was the wrong rifle. Not the deactivated demo unit, but a fully functional model, temporarily stored in the room for later servicing. It should have been locked, tagged, and removed. Somehow, it wasn't. Security rushed in. An alert was issued. Investigations began immediately. The headlines wrote themselves. Teen nearly discharges rifle in Royal Barracks. Guard commander under scrutiny. Callum was pulled from duty, pending review. But something else happened too. That night, Arjun approached Elliot. "You almost turned this place into a punchline," he said. "That rifle's safety might have saved us, but your attitude nearly destroyed his reputation." Elliot didn't respond. Not then, but days later, Callum received a letter. Handwritten. "Sergeant Hayes, I mocked what I didn't understand. You were trying to teach us discipline, while I was trying to be clever. I thought standing still made you small, but now I see. It makes you unshakable. Thank you for not raising your voice, when I gave you every reason to." Elliot Callum returned to duty weeks later. No charges, no disgrace, just a sharper understanding of how one careless click could echo far beyond the walls of a barracks, and how silence sometimes speaks louder than any shout. It had been 2 weeks since the incident, the click that nearly cost Sergeant Callum Hayes his career, and almost turned a military demonstration into a media disaster. The headlines faded. The review board cleared his name. Elliot's handwritten apology had gone viral in military circles, even earning Callum a quiet nod from the commanding officer. But deep down, Callum wasn't at ease, because something still didn't sit right. That rifle, the rifle, wasn't supposed to be there. It had been logged for maintenance, tagged for transport to the armory's secure vault. So how did it end up on a table full of decommissioned weapons? Callum could have let it go. He'd been cleared. He could have kept his head down and moved on, but that's not who he was. One morning, after a quiet PT session and black coffee from the barracks mess, Callum requested access to the maintenance logs. No noise, no official report, just curiosity. Or maybe instinct, and what he found made his stomach turn. The rifle in question was never signed back in. The tag had been removed manually. The logbook entry, forged. He double-checked, triple-checked, still the same. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately planted a live weapon among training props. At first, Callum thought, maybe a cruel prank, but there was no humor in this. Not when you're dealing with high-profile students, VIP children, and Royal Guard reputations. No one laughed at Sabotage. Callum turned to Corporal Singh, his closest friend in the barracks. "I think someone wanted this to go wrong," he said flatly. Singh didn't laugh, he just nodded. "I'll help you dig." They kept quiet, told no one. But over the next 48 hours, they went through footage from the internal corridor cameras, focusing on a 3-hour window before the cadets' visit. That's when they saw it. A man, dressed in standard maintenance gear, entering the weapons room. Badge partially turned, head angled down. He moved like someone who belonged, but never once looked up at the cameras. He was in and out in under 4 minutes. But Callum recognized the walk. Private Andrew Traynor. Just 2 months into his reassignment, clean record, quick learner, but always too eager. Always asking about PR drills, media cycles. "How do these mishaps go viral, Sarge?" It didn't add up until it did. Callum and Singh found a Reddit post just 2 days after the incident. An anonymous account leaking inside footage of the cadet visit, heavily edited, spun to make the Queen's Guard look incompetent. The video had 300,000 views before it was flagged and removed. Traynor had motive. He was a social media obsessive, desperate for views. Combine that with access, and the pieces fell into place. But Callum didn't go public. Instead, he walked into the commander's office, evidence in hand, and said 7 words. "He tried to break us from within." Traynor was discharged within a week. No formal charges, just an honorable exit with a sealed report. The Guard chose quiet dignity over public scandal. That's the way things worked. But Callum knew, and so did Sophie, who returned weeks later to deliver a small box. Inside was her brother's old beret and a folded letter. "Your silence protected more than reputation. It protected the next generation from thinking honor can be manipulated." Callum placed the beret in his locker, next to Elliot's apology note. Because, in his world, some victories weren't loud. They didn't make headlines, they were quiet. Quiet like discipline, quiet like honor, and quiet like the man who stood still, while everything else tried to make him move. 3 weeks passed. The barracks had returned to routine. March, Polish, repeat. On the surface, everything looked normal. But Sergeant Callum Hayes felt the shift, like a ripple under glass. A tension that hadn't been there before. Private Traynor was gone. The report was sealed. No formal announcement, just a name scrubbed from the duty roster and a locker emptied overnight. That's how the Queen's Guard handled internal rot. Swift, silent, without ceremony. But outside the gates, the world wasn't as disciplined. It started with a podcast. A viral military affairs show based out of Manchester released a special episode titled Silence or Suppression. The incident at Wellington Barracks. Within hours, headlines followed. Cover-up alleged in cadet rifle mishap. Sergeant Hayes dodged responsibility? Were VIP teens put at risk for PR? No one knew the truth, of course, but that didn't matter. The story had legs, and Callum's name was at the center of it. He was called into the commander's office once again. This time, the conversation felt colder. "Media wants a statement," the colonel said, eyes heavy. "They want to know what you knew and when." Callum clenched his jaw. "I didn't leak anything. I protected the students. I handled the problem." "Yes," the colonel replied, "but you didn't protect yourself." That's when it hit him. His silence, his decision not to expose Traynor publicly, was now being twisted into complicity. 2 days later, a journalist tracked him down outside the barracks. He was off duty, just walking to the corner cafe. She stuck a mic in his face like a weapon. "Sergeant Hayes, did you knowingly allow a loaded rifle in the cadet room? Were you trying to minimize a scandal?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't react. He simply said, "When you wear this uniform, you learn to carry the weight of things you didn't break." It went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. But truth doesn't trend as fast as controversy. Soon, internet warriors were dissecting his facial expression, his posture, even how he held his coffee cup. And inside the barracks, whispers returned. That weekend, he visited Sophie, quietly, privately. She was volunteering at a youth memorial program for fallen soldiers. "You okay?" she asked, seeing the storm in his eyes. Callum paused, then spoke. "I'm being judged by people who never stood still in the rain, who never watched a clock tick for 6 hours straight while knowing your own brother might not come back from patrol." Sophie nodded, then handed him something, a small laminated card. "We're building something here, a youth program, honor education, and we need someone who knows what holding the line really means." He took it. Back at the barracks, something had shifted. Elliot, now back for an official cadet ceremony, walked up and offered his hand. This time, not for show. "Sir, they talk about you out there. Some mock, some question, but the ones who get it, they listen. You taught me that silence isn't weakness. It's weight." For the first time in a long time, Callum smiled. Not for a camera, not for an officer, just for himself. Because honor isn't about being understood by everyone. It's about being able to stand tall, even when the world leans sideways. And that's exactly what Sergeant Hayes did. He stood still. A month after the podcast storm had settled, Sergeant Callum Hayes was doing what he always did, fading back into routine. His name was no longer trending. The youth honor program Sophie started had gained quiet traction. And for the first time, in a long while, Callum felt like things were finally stable until the envelope arrived. It wasn't official military post. It didn't come with a crest or a commanding officer's seal. It was hand-delivered, tucked between duty reports. No sender listed. Just one line on the front. "Private audience. Level red, clearance required." Inside, a request marked urgent. Callum was being asked to join a closed-door detail for a senior defense minister's son. Yes, that defense minister, scheduled to visit the barracks for a press tour. And the son? None other than Elliot. Callum read the memo twice, then a third time. The request wasn't optional. It had been phrased like one, but in the Army, you learn to read between lines. This wasn't about honor. It wasn't even about protocol. It was about optics. They wanted the disgraced but silently cleared sergeant standing beside the reformed, photogenic cadet. The perfect image of discipline meeting redemption. Press-friendly, scandal-proof. Callum felt his jaw clench. He'd stood through shrapnel, frostbite, and days without sleep. But this was different. This was a staged narrative. And he was the prop. He approached his CO. "Permission to decline respectfully?" The colonel shook his head. "This comes from higher up, Hayes, ministry level." Callum stood there, fists at his sides, and then he nodded. The next morning, the press arrived. Flashes burst, microphones were extended, and there, under a spring sky, stood Elliot in ceremonial uniform, polished and poised. Next to him, stoic still, was Callum in full regalia, the picture of military perfection. but something was off. Mid-tour, Callum noticed a figure among the crew, Trainer, disguised as a press assistant, holding a boom mic, lurking just out. A frame. It was him, the same walk, the same twitch of the hand. Callum's instincts lit up like wildfire. He whispered to an aide, "Get internal security. Do it quietly." Meanwhile, he continued the tour. But his eyes never left Trainer. What was he doing here? The tour ended. The handshake photos were taken. The minister smiled. Elliot said all the right things. But behind the scenes, Callum watched. As security escorted Trainer off-site, the boom mic had been modified, fitted with a parabolic microphone capable of capturing high-security comms from 60 feet. He hadn't come for a story. He'd come to record sensitive operational data during a royal security tour. That night, Callum sat alone in the locker room. He didn't feel victorious. He felt used. The same people who asked him to guard the nation's image had almost let a security leak happen right next to him. And once again, it was his alertness, not their systems, that stopped it. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. "You still think no one notices the quiet ones? Today, you saved everyone again. Without yelling, you just stood still and saw what no one else did." Callum looked at his reflection in the locker mirror. The beret, the medals, the scars. People thought standing still meant standing down. But Callum Hayes knew better. Sometimes the people who never move are the only ones who see everything. Days after Trainer was quietly escorted off the premises, Sergeant Callum Hayes expected fallout, but not like this. A formal letter arrived, not from his commanding officer this time, but from the Office of Strategic Image and Security Liaison, a department he didn't even know existed. Clean font, polished seal, language so vague it said everything without saying anything. The message was clear. Don't talk about what you saw. Not to press, not to Parliament, not even internally. We're containing the incident, it said, to preserve institutional integrity. Callum read it twice. Then he burned it. He thought it was over. Until he was summoned. Again. Same gray. Briefing room. Same stale tea, but this time he wasn't alone. Across from him sat Elliot's father, the defense minister himself, immaculately dressed. Calm. Cold. "I'll get to the point, Sergeant Hayes," the man said. "Your service has been admirable. Your discipline exceptional. But discipline also includes discretion. The boy's name, my son's name, has been linked to enough controversy. We need to clean the slate, fully." Callum didn't flinch. "You mean erase the record?" "I mean," the minister said, leaning forward, "we want you to endorse his candidacy for ceremonial commission." A silence filled the room. Callum blinked. "You want me to vouch for him, after all this?" "You'll be given a scripted statement, a press-ready video. It won't be live. You'll be brief, neutral, the right words from the right man, and we close the book. No more whispers. No more Trainer footage. Everyone wins." Callum exhaled, slowly. Years of discipline told him not to react, but something cracked inside. He remembered the cadet room, the click of a loaded rifle, the shame in Elliot's face after the letter, the pride in Sophie's eyes when she gave him her brother's. Spirit. The weight of medals that never came with armor. He stood up. "You want a soldier to lie so a politician's son can look brave." The minister narrowed his eyes. "Watch your tone." Callum didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Sir, I've stood in the cold for 9 hours straight. I've buried brothers without cameras watching. I've watched men bleed so others can speak freely. But I will not be the mouthpiece of a rewritten truth." He saluted, short, precise, and left the room. The next day, an official memo announced his voluntary early retirement. Honorable discharge, no scandal, no story. But inside the locker room, something extraordinary happened. Every guard in his regiment stood in silence. No words, no clapping. Just stillness. For Callum, it meant everything. Later that week, Sophie invited him to speak, off the record, at the Honor Youth Program's opening ceremony. He walked in with no uniform, no rank, just presence, and said, "Being brave doesn't mean shouting the loudest. It means standing still when everyone's running from truth. It means protecting something invisible, like trust or memory." Sometimes the biggest battles aren't won with weapons, but with refusal. Months passed. Elliot never took the commission. Instead, he joined a civilian relief unit overseas. Quietly, without a press release. Callum started working with cadets. Real ones. Kids who didn't want a title, just something to believe in. And somewhere in a box under his bed, between folded letters and a worn beret, sat the words that guided him till the end. Stand still. See everything. Move only when it matters. And that's exactly what he did. Now that you've heard Callum's journey, from the quiet strength behind the Queen's Guard to the unshakable stand he took when no one else would, we want to hear from you. What would you have done in his place? Would you have followed the script and protected your reputation? Or stood your ground and risked it all for the truth? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on the choices Callum made. Was he right? To walk away from the institution he gave his life to? Have you ever had to choose between staying silent or speaking out? This channel isn't just about storytelling. It's about shared values, silent heroes, and the decisions that define character. We read every comment, and your perspective matters more than you know. So whether you're a veteran, a student, or someone who simply respects integrity, we invite you to be part of this conversation. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow's episode will take this series even deeper, with a twist you won't see coming. Thank you for watching, and thank you for standing still when it truly counts.